This is Matthew Kratter's Bitcoin University. Today I want to talk about Abu Dhabi stacking Bitcoin IOUs. We found out over the weekend that the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund bought $437 million worth of BlackRock spot ETF, spot Bitcoin ETF, the IBIT. And it looks like they bought it in the fourth quarter of last year of 2024. Sovereign Wealth Fund, of course, is a state-owned investment fund. There's that keyword sovereign in there. So I would say it's not exactly self-sovereignty if you own Bitcoin IOUs like IBIT, issued by a company, BlackRock in another country, backed by Bitcoin, held by a company, Coinbase, in another country, both of them in the US, obviously. I don't think it's a very smart move if you want to be truly sovereign. Now, obviously, the UAE and the US are on good terms today, but my understanding is that the UAE is definitely more closely allied with countries like Saudi Arabia in the region, which has been rapidly moving from being an enforcer of the petrodollar standard to selling oil directly in yuan to geopolitical competitors of the U.S. like China and possibly Russia as well. And I'll link to this article in the description notes below about the increasing Saudi-China ties and how they're doing yuan or renminbi-based oil trading. If push comes to shove and the UAE sides with Saudi Arabia in a global conflict where the U.S. is on the other side, heaven forbid, expect those shares of IBIT to be confiscated. It's definitely unthinkable today, but I still think it's important to expect the best, but plan for the worst. And I would say that truly sovereign Bitcoiners buy real BTC if they can and hold their own private keys rather than outsourcing this to a third party. I think it's one thing if you're 7 years old or you're 77 years old and you don't want to deal with the hassles of hardware wallets, but I think there's really no excuse if you're a highly advanced and well-run country or emirate and you have millions or billions or trillions of dollars. I think this is almost as dumb as Russia storing some of its gold abroad right before they invaded Ukraine. Not quite that dumb, but most of these overseas assets were confiscated when Russia invaded Ukraine. Now, it appears that Abu Dhabi's position in this BlackRock spot Bitcoin ETF is just a starter kit. If you Google it, it looks like Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth funds control $1.7 trillion, which is just unbelievable. That's a lot of oil money. But if you take 437 million divided by 1.7 trillion, you end up with 0.0257%. That's not 2.57%. That's 2/100ths. That's 2/100ths of 1%. So it's a really, really tiny starter position, which is fine. That's how you always start off and you try out and you see if you like how the investment's working. But I would say if Abu Dhabi decides that they want more Bitcoin exposure, I would urge them to buy the real thing and not just IOUs. Doing multi-sig cold storage, it's really not that hard. And I think it's actually much easier than getting oil out of the ground, which is a much more complicated process to do safely. If you're enjoying this video so far, I just ask you to help to support this channel's educational mission. Hit the subscribe button. That does really help with engagement and reach for this channel. Leave a like, leave a comment, question, suggestion for a future video. Share this video with a friend or family member. We should still keep this in perspective and realize that this is still really good news what Abu Dhabi's doing. While everyone was saying that governments were going to ban BTC, here instead we have a government buying Bitcoin, or at least buying Bitcoin IOUs, and that's definitely great news, and it's a real sea change from what was happening a few years ago. Buying Bitcoin ETFs is still much smarter, I think, than buying U.S. government bonds or tech stocks or any other thing that Abu Dhabi could invest in with their sovereign wealth funds. Abu Dhabi is getting Bitcoin IOUs, not the worst thing in the world. It gives you price exposure to Bitcoin. But for you and me who hold the real thing, who hold BTC, we're still benefiting from this buying as we experience a surge in purchasing power. And unlike Abu Dhabi, we own the real digital commodity. We own the real thing. We can send it over the Bitcoin network or the Lightning network without needing to ask anyone permission. We can receive it from anyone without needing to ask permission. We can hold it ourselves as a bearer asset without needing to trust a third party like a bank or brokerage. And when you hold your own private keys, when you hold your own Bitcoin in cold storage, no one can take it from you. No one can turn it off as they can with the IBIT ETF shares. The Bitcoin that backs the BlackRock spot ETF is being held at Coinbase custody. If Coinbase custody ever gets hacked, your Bitcoin, my Bitcoin will be fine because we're not leaving it at Coinbase. We hold our own private keys. Not so for Abu Dhabi. Now, speaking of buying Bitcoin IOUs, there's a question in yesterday's video. I just heard a popular YouTuber state, somewhat alarmed and confused, that at least 4 major Bitcoin holders are selling their Bitcoin. I also read that Plan B sold his Bitcoin and moved to an ETF. The question, why are major BTC holders selling all their BTC and some are moving it into ETFs? Is there anything to learn from their actions? He's referring, of course, to this tweet, which got a lot of engagement. This is from Plan B at 100 trillion USD. Disclosure, I've transferred my Bitcoin to ETFs, which basically means he sold his BTC and then used the proceeds to buy a spot Bitcoin ETF. Yes, I know, not your keys, not your coins, but it's just easier for me to manage Bitcoin the same way as equities and bonds. Also, not having to hassle with keys gives me peace of mind. I guess I'm not a maxi anymore. When I saw this, my immediate thought was all those capital gains taxes, but it's interesting he actually addresses that. He currently says he lives in the Netherlands. Netherlands has no realized capital gains tax, so selling is not a tax event. We have unreal capital gains tax, a wealth tax. The government assumes you make a 6% return on your entire wealth per January 1st, and you pay about a 30% tax, so you pay 2% of your entire net wealth every year. That is unbelievable wealth confiscation. So it looks like, at least for Plan B, the tax consequences of doing this were really not a concern. I did a quick calculation before I saw this. Let's say he sold $1 million of Bitcoin, just to make the math really easy. And we're also going to assume that he paid $0 for the Bitcoin, which he probably obviously didn't. But assume a cost basis of $0. If he were in the US, because I have a lot of US listeners, 20% long-term capital gains tax, 3.8% Obama, the NIIT tax, that would be $193,763 in taxes. So you'd only have $806,237 left to reinvest. That's the problem with trading Bitcoin or selling it to buy IBIT. When you exit, you have to pay that tax, and then you have less money left over to reinvest. I did the calculation here. You'll see that the effective tax rate is a little bit more. I'm not sure exactly if this is correct. I basically used an initial value of $100 here, then assumed it was sold $1 million higher. So that's where I'm getting my numbers from. But either way, you'll get approximately a number that's pretty close to a 20% capital gains tax. So this is why it's very tax inefficient and very silly to trade in and out of Bitcoin, and also to sell your BTC and then to repurchase it, to repurchase IBIT. So it's definitely not something that I would recommend doing. But of course, if Abu Dhabi, if Plan B want to hold Bitcoin IOUs instead of Bitcoin itself, instead of BTC itself, it's certainly their money. It's their right to do so. No one knows what their particular circumstances are. But I have to say that I really don't like, when it comes to the topic of Plan B, I don't like how Plan B handled the last cycle and the failure of his Bitcoin pricing models. There's a lot of history there. I don't want to get in a fight. I don't want to go into it. But if you were there, you probably know what I'm talking about if you're watching this channel over that period. I personally don't think that Plan B is an honest actor. Again, that's just my opinion, so do your own research. And I think he also has a long history of engagement baiting, which obviously works because I just mentioned him in this video, but I'll be blocking him after I post this video. I don't think telling people that you're moving from Bitcoin to IBIT and then trying to get engagement from it is a really nice thing to do, especially given his history. If you want to take a look at that history, I will link to this video in the description notes below. Maybe Plan B made some full apology like I did here. I never saw it. And so I think he's a little bit of a wriggly fish, and I would avoid reading his stuff. Again, that's just my opinion, and he's probably a really nice guy in real life. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.